Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Sippin and Selling.
With Joey Chanel. Welcome back to another episode of Sippin and Selling. Today I have Marian Leitner-Waldman from Archer Roose Wines as my guest. Welcome to the show, Marian.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. As I shared, you are my one and only wine guest, so bring your A game. Super excited. Cheers to you guys and Archer Roose Wines.
Cheers.
Thank you. I'm so excited. I'll take a sip after I continue to talk. I'm so excited to talk to you about your product because I've been sipping on it for some time now. I have an affinity for wine. It doesn't love me usually. I talk about it openly. However, because of your perfect pour, it is just the right amount for me. I never have to sacrifice a bottle. I never have to find a friend to help me drink a bottle. It's at my disposal. It's the perfect pour.
That's exactly what I want to hear.
It's the truth. And I've been, like I said, I've been sipping on the bubbly rosé today. You also sent me some samples. We have a few here on display, and I'm going to ruin the display. We have the Pinot Noir and a Sauvignon Blanc. But you have other SKUs as well, correct?
We do. So we produce wine in 6 different countries around the world. So we've got our bubbly, which is our Prosecco, our bubbly rosé, which you're enjoying right now. In addition to the Sauvignon Blanc and Pinot Noir, we also have a Pinot Grigio and a Malbec rosé, and we are launching our first Chardonnay actually this month. So we are releasing a Chardonnay from France, which is also dangerously delicious, just like all of our wines.
So exciting. Thank you for sharing that on the show. I'm looking forward to trying it. Yes, I am sipping on the bubbly rosé. That is my go-to during the day when I'm filming. And I have tried all the other varietals. Like I said, they're all delicious. And I want to rewind to my first time ever seeing a wine in a can brand. I remember it vividly. Don't remember which brand it was. Don't know if they're still here. Didn't care to do the research because I just care about your brand. I like the quality of the product. But it was like 2006 or 7, I feel like. I was at the WSWA in Vegas, and it was walking around the floor. And I remember with my father being like, wow, look at this. This is so cool. It's a wine in a can. And him just rolling his eyes and being like, yes, that's gross. It's not going to last. It's going to spoil. Who's going to want to drink that? And now here we are how many years later, and you guys are doing it right. And I want to get behind the business of the can because there's a very cool story about how you guys formulated the product to be on the shelf long lasting. But what made you get into the wine business in the first place?
Well, first and foremost, you have to love wine because this is a crazy business to be in.
Mm-hmm.
And I love all alcoholic beverages, but the thing that I love about wine is it's just very soulful to me. It's really one of the best ways to tell a story of like a place. And so we really wanted to build, a brand that could tell stories of different places. And in order to do that, quality had to be first and foremost because we just wanted to make sure that you could have that just a better glass of wine. That there was no barrier between you and opening that bottle. So in order to do that, we knew that we had to be a replacement pour. And there's a little known story that I like to draw upon, which is when AB InBev, actually not ABV InBev, excuse me, in 2005, less than 4% of beer globally was put into a can.
Okay.
Fast forward 20 years, and now more than 80% of beer is put into a can. And when I was digging into the story and figuring out how do we bring the best, a better glass of wine to consumers, I found out that there was changes to can technology in 2008 that really facilitated craft beer to be able to replace to be able to reach for a can and transition from being mostly bottled to cans. And I realized, wow, okay, this chemistry is going to be key to this. And so, being from the East Coast, where there are so many great craft brewers, we actually did a tour of really digging in with a lot of brewers that we knew to say, when you were transitioning from a bottle to a can, what did you learn? And the biggest piece that they came back to us with was you cannot take beer that was meant to be bottled and just put it into a can. You actually have to brew the beer specifically for the can. And so that became this launching point for us of saying, okay, we really need to learn the chemistry of what it means to be in a hermetically concealed container. And how do we ensure that we're partnering with good actors who have the right chemistry in their can lining?
Mm.
So the combination of those two things can mean that we get a true replacement pour for a bottle. And it took a couple of years for us to really hone in and get it right. Um, but we were really proud of the results. It means that we have 2 years shelf life, but of course, we expect our cans to be bought and drunk right away. This is not something to hold on to and bottle age, but we pride ourselves on the fact that you can have a really great sensory experience, pour it into a glass, and you would never know that it comes from a can.
Absolutely. And it is a big deal that it lasts 2 years because on my side of the industry, selling to chains, you guys are in this umbrella of RTDs, and I know you don't mind that because you like that line of ready to drink. And it is like the biggest no whenever it's a 6 month to a year expiration date, because sometimes it takes that long to get from purchase of yes to the shelf, right? So you guys have this leeway, which even if it's not going to be 2 years, it's nice to say it. It does help get your, I think your brand in front of a lot, because it's the first and only I've ever heard of having that shelf life. And yes, I want to get into the technology because you guys partnered with Cornell University, which is crazy. And you came up with this technology, and is it the actual liner, or what is it that you guys partnered with them to try to can your products?
Well, it's a couple of things. So, first off, we help fund studies with Cornell University to really dig in to understand the chemistry of wine in a can. And we're a part of a consortium of companies that contribute to that. But what we learned from partnering with Cornell on studies was how to start running our own trials and building our own data set. And so since 2019, we've been leaning on the fact that we run our canning line every 6 to 8 weeks. And so every 6 to 8 weeks, we are testing our cans that come off the line, their chemistry, everything about it, to really hone in on a few different elements that we have learned really impacts the performance of wine in can. And that comes from a few different areas. It comes from the winemaking process, the co-packing process, and then ultimately the insights that have led to the development of our own technology around this. But I think it's really important to note that the it's kind of actually all three things working together that really help drive our shelf life. And we're continuing to learn how different things like heat and which is it sounds kind of esoteric, but is really important when you think about exactly that chain, that supply chain that you were just referring to, because like how like if a case of wine is left on a loading dock outside of a chain retailer in a hot summer sun, like we need to make sure that that's still going to taste great when it's on the shelf. So we have to understand all these different pieces, which is why it's a continuous learning process. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
It makes sense. And absolutely. And I've had an experience at a retailer one time. I went to go buy back in the day a different cans brand of wine, and it was leaking, right? So that's part of the issue, especially down here in South Florida. You always have to worry about the preservation of the products. And yeah, even if they're doing their job on the viaducts and loading, it takes time, especially if they have a big order. So I appreciate that you're always learning and trying to make a better product and trying to think of those things to keep your inventory intact. So you started the Archer Roose brand. I have listened to a couple podcasts in the past about the story, but for my listeners who are new to your product, I want them to know everything from the ground up. So you love wine, which most of us do too. And that's a great place to start. But then it's more like, okay, I'm going to go into business and I'm going to start a wine brand when you didn't come from that side of the industry, right? So, like I said, I've listened, I've heard your story before, but I'd love for you to share with my audience about the labor of love that went into Archer Roose.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. So the story of Archer Roose really started around my dining room table, and the idea was really simple. I just wanted to have a better glass of wine without opening up a bottle. It was a long day, and I had a business trip the next day, and I knew that if I opened up a bottle of wine, it would most likely go bad in my refrigerator. And I looked around craft beer and craft spirits, and I saw that, there those categories had really evolved to meet the consumer where they were. Like they were offering premium products, but still at a great price point. They had created characters and marketing campaigns that really spoke directly to the consumer. And they increasingly told great quality stories that also offered transparency into ingredients. And so I kind of looked at the wine space and I saw an opportunity to one create a format to fit people's lifestyle and in the process solve what I thought was a really key consumer insight, which was I kept hearing from people, I want to have a glass of wine, but I don't want to open up that bottle. So this gave them the freedom to do that. But I also knew that the only way that it would really work was if one, we also created a brand that could be that true replacement for. So that's where like caring so much about how this wine is made and really being pioneers in how we package the wine was so important. And then the third piece was we wanted to create a story around our brand that was not about, a family name or a geography, that instead really leaned into uh, you know, giving ourselves permission to simplify the wine aisle, ensure that people could get to know this brand as like just a really fun way to interact with wine. But then there would be the character of Archer Roose who could travel around the world, and we could go to many different geographies to bring people the on-trend varieties that they wanted to drink, and each can would be a postcard from her travels. And so that's what's been so fun is, getting to work with amazing winemakers around the globe, really bringing them on to our, I would say, mission to really change the wine industry from the inside out. Um, and in the process, connect consumers to a product that hopefully speaks their language a lot more and kind of provides an entry point to wine and a ladder, which is something that I think is really missing from wine today. So that we can bring more people into this category and then they can graduate up into the Burgundies and Barolos and Bordeaux's or all these other fancy wines that start with B's, clearly.
Let's see how
But
many we can name.
100%. But like, it really needs that. It needs an easy entry point, and that's what we want to be.
And you are. And like I said, I'm a fan. You're doing a great job. And there's so much more that goes into this story. So, yes, you have this character of Archer Roose. You have a moose as your logo. That is not the typical, right? To have like a
Correct.
literary type
That was
of.
by design.
Right. And let's go into that a little bit. What was the idea behind the name?
So, as I mentioned, like we didn't want to be just our last name vineyard or
Mhm.
winery. We didn't want it to just be based on geography. We really wanted to create a character that was fun and would give us a sense of irreverence. So we created this badass adventurer, Archer Roose, who travels the world. And that way we could connect all of our different wine growing regions. And of course, she rides a moose because, I mean, isn't that all of our preferred modes of transportation?
Sure.
But the moose is actually the only animal that's totally indigenous to North America. And so as a global brand, we still wanted to have that ode to North America. And and at the end of the day, we also realized that there were many instances amongst consumers where they'll say, I had a great bottle of wine last night, but I can't remember what it's called and I can never seem to find it again. And so we wanted to create not just a brand architecture in our name, but also a logo, a visual identifier, so that if you had a glass of our wines and you loved it, you could always find it again. And so that's why we have Archer Roose, our badass adventurer, traveling the world on her moose, so that you can never forget us.
I love it. And it's kind of a nod to your name. I was teasing you before that your mom must have been a Robin Hood fan because I'd never heard of a Marion before. Marion sounds like she would ride a moose.
I mean, to be honest, when I'm helping people learn how to pronounce my name, I say, "Oh, don't you know Marion the librarian?" So this all kind of is very on brand.
So fun. I'm a little cheesy, so forgive me. Um,
Oh, me too. Lean in on the cheese.
I love it. Okay, good. I'll match your cheese energy level. So then you decide to come out with this product. You decide that you're going to put it in a can because you see what's happening with beer. And then how did you pick the wineries and vineyards that you partnered with in the 6 countries?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So, well, to go back to the first one, which is actually always the hardest. So
Hmm.
now we're talking about 2016, and canned wine doesn't really exist at all back then.
Right.
And I actually was working full time at the World Bank. So I was kind of doing this off the side of my desk. And I, needed to go and find some. We had this basically idea, but we decided to start in South America because it was the same time zone, so that
Hmm.
like it wasn't too crazy from working a double shift perspective.
Yeah, makes sense.
Um, and we knew we wanted to start with Sauvignon Blanc because I was a huge believer that uh, Casablanca is one of just the best places in the world for white wine.
Hmm.
And I really love the Sauvignon Blanc that they make there, which in my mind is much more like a Sancerre French style than a New Zealand style. And I just thought that it was super quaffable. So basically went out and I bought all of the Sauvignon Blanc bottles that I could find.
No kidding.
And we taste tested probably 150,
Wow.
and I started to like catalog who were the winemakers or assistant winemakers, and we began to just reach out to people. And most people were like, canned wine? Like, absolutely not. I don't want to work with you. And we got exceptionally lucky because this very well trained, like, had worked for a couple of the biggest, names in the business, had been, learned winemaking in Bordeaux, even though he's Spanish born, and had since moved to Chile. And he was an assistant winemaker at the time and wanted an opportunity to really make his mark in the world. And so he agreed to give us a shot. And I love to say, like, the first year we produced about 24,000 liters with him. And last year we did around 200,000
Wow.
liters of Sauvignon Blanc with him. So it's been quite a ride.
Okay.
Um, quite a ride. But anyway, he was sort of the first one. And as our business grew, we added Malbec from Mendoza next. I then went full time to the company, and with every winemaker, it's kind of and every product we've launched, it's gotten a little easier and our options have expanded. And now at this point, when we go to people and we say, we're working with JetBlue, we're working with Princess Cruises, Elizabeth Banks is an investor in the face of our brand and helping to tell the story. It's just gotten that much easier to bring great talent on board. So we've been exceptionally lucky. But that first one was really it was a lesson in just knocking on doors and telling our story and sharing a vision of what we thought the wine industry could be.
And you did your research, right? And you wanted to find something that you liked, which is important. A lot of people will just either source what's easy. You were very methodical. You thought about the same time zones and on everything else you went down the rabbit hole about. Now, on the back of Archer Roose's cans, you have your practice, your place, your people, profile. Luca is on the back of Sauvignon Blanc. Is he the winemaker
He
still?
is. He's
Okay.
still the winemaker.
Amazing. That's so cool. I love that you honor him and everybody else in each of the other regions. And you have done a lot of things that are smart and advanced with like the QR code. And it's just very clever, eye catching. Like you said, you're doing a lot of things right that I'm sure weren't so perfect ish, right? In the beginning, I'm sure you had a lot of mistakes and hiccups too. And I would love to open up that bag because a lot of people listening are always
Oh,
looking for entrepreneur stories, and a true
yeah,
entrepreneur has failed a million times, right? Like
a
it's
thousand
never,
times.
yeah, it's never perfect. It's never just so easy. And I talk about it all the time, even myself included. And I think that's the true spirit, is that if you have the right people behind you and supporting you, you'll get through it. And I want to hear about your support system and some of the challenges in the beginning.
All right. Well, there's two very separate questions. Who's my support system and what are my challenges?
Okay.
And I sort of joke that a requirement for being an entrepreneur is um, a constitution like Teflon and a very short-term memory because you know you can't dwell on your mistakes and you can't dwell on the crazy things that happen because good Lord, there are so many of them.
Mhm.
Um, so what would you like me to tackle first?
I think let's start with what wasn't so rosy in the beginning.
Okay. Well, obviously, I had very little experience
Mm.
in the industry coming into this, and I really approached it like a business. And the reality is that the alcohol industry is not a business. It's like an ongoing relationship.
Yep.
And so, I had to really earn a lot of trust on a variety of fronts. But one of the biggest things that I sort of took into this was I was like, listen, I don't want to build a typical supplier distributor relationship. I really want I want us to be partners and I want us to be on the same team. And so I really wanted to learn how did their business work and what were the things that mattered.
Okay.
And one of the things that became really apparent to me very quickly was shelf life.
Mhm.
So that's like, what kicked off my like obsession with QA/QC,
Right.
which leads me to one of my first big mistakes.
Okay.
So I go, I've gone ahead and we've done our first run of cans
Mhm.
and within 6 weeks, they immediately started leaking.
Oh,
And and literally I remember the winery. So in order just to kind of paint this picture, I had convinced a, winery in upstate New York to bring in a mobile canner to do this. And literally like everyone thought that I was crazy to do this in the first place.
right.
Um, and everyone told me that it would fail. And so the fact that our test run 6 weeks later, the cans were leaking,
Right.
everyone was just like, "Yep, this just goes to show that wine shouldn't be in a can."
Right.
And I guess because I'm just extremely stubborn, I was like, "Okay, I've gotta figure this out, what's going on?" So I reached out to a friend of mine who was working in the food science lab at Cornell, and they told me, "Oh, well, like the issue is that there is an instance of copper, that's appearing in your wine that is totally within the like what's considered, healthy or safe limits, but it's interacting with the can chemistry because copper is corrosive to aluminum. So essentially, during the fill
Mm.
process, the
Okay.
wine obviously had got to the outside of the can and it was eroding the cans."
Mm.
And I was like, "Copper? That's really interesting." Like, okay, let me dig into this a little bit more. And, I realized, of course, pretty quickly after, talking to our winemakers, that of course there was copper in it because copper is considered an organic intervention in many white wine growing regions in particular
Mhm.
to protect against mold.
Okay.
Um, and this was just like one of the earliest examples of things that we had to learn of like how we actually had to adjust the winemaking process,
Right.
and even how the grapes were grown to make sure that we could have wines that were, that could hold up in a can. So that's just one example. I will admit, I thought that we were going to go under in that moment.
Right. Of course. Like, I'm sure it wasn't cheap, a cheap accident, so that's
It
unfortunate.
was not.
And
It was not. But
nobody likes to hear "I told you so" either, right? So that
no,
probably sucked.
yeah, and so one thing that was really smart was that my business partner had or it was also my husband had just graduated from his business school, and he had this great professor who said, "Listen, you really need to think about things in terms of affordable loss."
Mm.
So the one good thing about the way that we were canning at the time and the way that we still can today was most wineries, they package one time a year, their entire supply. And so if I had gone through that model, I would have basically we would be out of business.
Mm,
But because from the get-go, we were like, okay, we're still learning this process. We're just going to do tests. We were able to absorb the loss. It was really painful, but we took the hit. And I literally like called my stakeholders back in and I was like, listen, you have to give me another shot. I'm going to ask that you still believe in this concept.
right.
And I walked them through the chemistry and I made sure that they knew that I understood the mistake that I made. And, the then questions that prompted me to ask so that I could really dial in and understand the chemistry better. And then we canned again, and somehow we still made it so that we were on the shelves for summer. I think the cans launched June 1st. So it's just an example of like things that can feel devastating and company ending. You can always find a way, and the trick is always to over communicate.
Mhm. And also, because I asked you, so that was a good segue. You have a great support system. It sounds like you work with your husband. I didn't know that, so that's wonderful. We can go down that path too. But because you had that support and you had that, it's okay, we'll figure it out. And this is what I think, 2 cents. That's major because a lot of people don't have that when they're trying to have that young entrepreneurial spirit. And that's why I said the ones that last, it's because of the good support system. That's how I feel personally. And you
For
have
sure.
to be transparent, like you're saying. Like you can't just say everything was great because it's not, and everybody knows you're full of it. And those are the stories that help you fuel yourself, right? And feel like, okay, I learned from my mistake. Don't want to make one of those again. So, like, let's do something different the next time. Even though it sounds like you were very much educating yourself and researching and doing a lot of things that people probably don't do, there were a few things you missed. And it's important to share with people because I think it's important and I think it's valuable knowledge for everybody.
Completely. And I think that like the exercise of being an entrepreneur is just constantly humbling.
Mm,
You constantly have to be willing to have a growth mindset and to be willing to learn and ask questions, particularly if you're doing something new.
right,
And I personally believe that like we are in an age where the alcohol industry is begging us to think differently, is begging for us to approach this differently. This isn't the time for me too products. And
right.
so but you have to understand that in order to do that, you're going to make mistakes. And to your point, my support system is everything to me, and it has evolved over time too. So I think it's really important to have both mentors in the industry and outside the industry, because it's important to both. You can't play a game where you don't know the rules,
Mm,
but you also have to once you've learned the rules, you have to understand where to find the loopholes.
right.
And that often means, you know, not thinking the way that everybody else is thinking. And so it's really important to have both. And I feel very lucky to have a number of professional mentors, and then to have a really good group of close friends who are also building their own businesses. And so when they ask me, "How are you doing?" I don't have to lie and say everything's fine. I
Right.
feel
That's
like,
important.
actually, it's a disaster, and here's why. And like every day I'm playing, the
Yeah,
what to do roulette because everything's a priority. And
right.
that's
Yeah,
just part of the fun of being a business owner.
1000%. And then you get stuck stranded in an airport, all of it happens. It just happens.
All of it happens constantly.
Constant. Okay, so we have a product. It's on the shelves June 1st in the summer. Where did you start? Which market did you start with and who was your first distributor?
So I started in New York City, and my first distributor was Frederick Wildman. So I'm from New York City originally,
Nice.
and I had a decent network there. So that felt like the best place to start. And Frederick Wildman was also the only distributor that said yes at this point. So
That's okay.
it was me, walking up and down the streets of New York City, knocking on doors and trying to make placements. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about just how hard alcohol sales are in this, is in this
Yeah.
industry. And it toughened my skin, but it also is like the best market research. So one of the things I feel really strongly about is that like there can be no sacred cows. Like your business is like your child, but and whereas like if you were to criticize my children, of course I'll defend them within an inch of my life.
Right.
You know, when it comes to my business, I actually have to be like, okay, let me take this feedback, like
Mhm.
internalize it. Does it make sense? Does it not make sense? And one thing at the time was that I learned from just selling our product up and down the streets of New York was originally the white part of our packaging was actually silver bulleted. So we hadn't colored the back part. And
Okay.
so I got this feedback, from uh our stores, like, actually they have a really hard time reading Archer Roose against the silver bullet background. So I was like,
Mm.
great, I can make that packaging change.
Right.
So it was just like little tweaks, which was great, and it allowed us to be super nimble. And then, but one thing that I learned really early was, Frederick Wildman is an excellent distributor, and they were the first to kind of import Barolos um, and they really built Burgundy in the United States. And they were a great fine wine house, but they really looked at our product as like a retail product.
Okay.
And I didn't have a huge budget in order to really like go out and do a marketing campaign
Right.
because I was bootstrapping this thing. And so I recognized pretty quickly that it was going to be really hard to scale Marion doing tastings in all retailers to get people to try it.
Right.
And I started, you know, thinking about every dive bar that I walked into in New York and how terrible the wine usually was, or at my favorite pizzeria or, burger joint. And I realized that there was just so many opportunities where that are also really high volume, like meaning like the sheer amount of foot traffic that goes through these accounts, where just wine wasn't really present.
Right.
And it wasn't really present because, you know, it was people either wanted like a mixed drink or they're drinking beer there. And, to be fair, it's not really in the types of environment where people are going to ruminate over what they're drinking.
Mhm.
But I thought was really interesting point for or really interesting opportunity for us. And so I ended up connecting with a beer distributor, Union Beer, and we started kicking around this idea of building this brand in the on premise because they had had a similar insight where they had started selling beer, they in their on premise accounts. Then they had moved to non-alc. Then they'd moved to spirits, and they really saw an opportunity in these types of accounts to actually pick up wine drinkers because they actually had gotten feedback from buyers that like if a wine drinker didn't see wine that they wanted to drink on the menu, maybe they had one drink or they didn't drink at all.
Right.
And that was a really interesting moment for me that was like, ha, there's money that we're being left on the table. And we are uniquely suited to fill this void.
Mhm.
So we started building out a playbook of the types of accounts where we would work well in, and we started to scale, and we scaled that game pretty fast. And I saw these velocities just constantly grow as our penetration grew, and I realized, man, like not only is there an opportunity to connect to the wine drinker, but once they tried our product and they saw that it was delicious and it was consistent, and it was better than what you're normally being offered in these settings. And by the way, there was real volume there.
Right.
We could really start to build something. And I'll be the first to admit that at first I thought this was rather a niche, like, more occasion driven product.
Right.
But then as this has grown and as we've actually now scaled this playbook across the country, I realized but the headline here is actually how much money the wine industry is leaving on the table by not showing up where consumers are. Because it's
Absolutely.
less that wine consumers are no longer, or sorry, it's less that consumers are no longer interested in wine. It's that where and how people are spending their time driven by, you know, macroeconomic reasons as well as like lifestyle changes.
Mhm.
Wine isn't showing up in those places as much.
Right.
So well, we're really excited now about, this strategy and how we're continuing to scale it.
Yeah, because there's so many convenience levels that you were not you directly because you're filling the void, but wine was in a void, like movie
Totally.
theaters or concerts and, those type of sporting events, lots of my friends do still love to drink wine like that. Me personally, like I said, it's what you're talking about. It's like at home at night, one glass. I'm not usually the one that's going out and having a glass of wine if I'm at a concert. So
Mhm.
it's nice that the people that are now have options, because usually they end up either not drinking, so you're losing money, or they're drinking something they don't enjoy and then they're dumping it. Again, waste of money, which I hate.
Totally.
Everybody hates wasting money. So it's so
Everybody.
smart because you did pick a lane and you guys are owning it. And it's really wonderful because you have a lot of people supporting your brand behind you. And you mentioned that you have this partnership with Elizabeth Banks. I'd love to hear how you guys got into business, how you found each other.
Love that. Yeah, so that really came around during the pandemic. So we had, slowly built this business to be, at that point we were 95% on premise.
And how many markets at that point?
We were in 8 markets.
Okay.
Um, and we were 95% on premise, and obviously the pandemic, that was no
Longer.
longer
Yeah.
an option.
Yeah.
So we needed to pivot the business, and so we needed to set up a D2C business like ASAP. And I actually had given birth to my first baby,
Oh,
basically the day of lockdown. So I
wow.
am trying to figure out how to, like, get us out of this crazy situation,
Right.
uh, and figuring out how to be a new mom. And I joke that because of the hormones, they made me very brave
Mm,
and really willing to throw a Hail Mary pass.
right.
And so I had this long-standing dream
Hmm.
of really bringing the Archer Roose character to life by really infusing it with humor and sophistication and, like, bringing a whole new level of creativity,
Hmm.
to, this very amusing, like, icon that we have, on top of all of our products.
Right.
And so, and I had always felt that, like, Elizabeth Banks would be the perfect person to bring it to life.
Oh,
And so I networked my way to her media agency at UTA Ventures,
uh-huh.
and I pitched them on the product, and then I pitched everybody around her on the product, and they finally let me send product to her.
Hmm.
And I'll never forget it. It was August. I get a call from her. She was floating down a river in Utah, with drinking some cans of Archer Roose, and she was like, "I get it. I'm so canned wine. I'm in."
Aw, I could hear her
And
saying that.
yeah, yeah. And, it was amazing. So then we started to really, like, spend time together over Zoom, but this was all over Zoom.
Right.
So by the time we finally met in person was when we were shooting our first commercial spot, um, to announce this partnership. And I'll never forget, like, waiting for her to kind of get to set. And we had written this incredibly funny script, and I was just like, "Oh my God, please, please may this all work out." And she showed up early. She was amazing and kind to everybody on set. She's the consummate professional. And I just knew from the get-go we were going to build a wonderful partnership together because she is just one of the smartest people in the biz. And
Mm,
not only is she funny and a good human, but she's a great businesswoman. So
amazing.
it's just been a great journey to be on.
That's awesome because it is very hard to pick someone to partner with, whether they're in, the realm of celebrity or not. It goes back to having a good support system, and you gotta align with the same values, right? And so for her to actually put her money where her mouth is, like the product, was like, okay, I'm behind it, I get it. That's huge, and in a lot of ways, very, very smart on your behalf, but also during that time, she partnered with you guys. We were still in COVID times, or was this after?
No, this was, like, just coming out of COVID.
Okay.
So she bet on us too.
Yeah. Because again, like you're coming out of it. So in theory, like people could be like, whatever, like we're gonna go back to our reality, and you were on prem. So like
Yep.
what did they really care about DTC? What did they care about retailers? So now, okay, you have this big star behind it. You're launching with her, this partnership, but you were still only on prem at the time. You said 85%. Now what? Now because she's behind it, were doors opening easier in retail space like chains, or was it still kind of like a slow is fast enough approach?
Well, um, we've basically first we rebuilt our on-premise business because one thing that she got and that I feel really strongly about was that you have to have pull. Like I just think that there's a lot of brands that go directly to chains and they ask those chains take a really big investment in them. And the chains don't know if it's going to work or not. And I know from experience that we have really strong pull when we have a great on-premise presence.
Okay.
So first, we really focused on rebuilding that on-premise business and then scaling that through national accounts in the on-premise channel. From there, we were able to win the JetBlue wine program. We launched with them, and that became an amazing opportunity for us to sample 2 million customers a year.
Right.
Um, and now we've really begun to build in retail. So we have wonderful partners from Target to Sprouts, and we've got a lot more that we're onboarding this year. Um, but where we've stayed disciplined in, and this was, I always have to recognize that like there was an initial push into canned wine that didn't go very well, and it
Right.
didn't go very well because people didn't think about the quality, and they also didn't think about the merchandising and where to be in the store. And so one thing that we've had to be really disciplined about is who's really willing to work with us to think about how we can set up this category in the store to really help upsell existing wine consumers,
Hmm.
but increase basket value and also bring new consumers into the fold. And that has meant taking some risks in merchandising, like giving us one of my favorite examples is like one of our retail partners. We showed them data at how on GoPuff, uh, the number one SKU or the number one and number two SKUs uh, that sorry, excuse me, the number 1 and 2 products that were bought along with, Archer Roose Bubbly was orange juice, which is obvious, and
Right.
baby wipes.
No kidding.
And so we were like, "All right, great. Like, let's test a stack in the store, like, in the baby products. Let's see how that goes at the end cap." And it did extremely well, because, a lot of new moms were going in and, buying stuff for their kids, and they were like, "Yeah, I really need a glass of wine." And
Hilarious.
so but I think that's like that I think is how, what we have to recognize as brand owners is that we're renting shelf space from our retail partners.
Right.
And so we have to figure out how we can add value. And that's not just making sure that the product pulls, but it's making sure that like we make sure that they get the optimal return on their investment they can while recognize that they're building a category, which
Right.
often has a longer pay, takes longer to pay off. So we're really excited about that, and yeah, uh, we've seen our chain business grow almost 45% year over year, and 25% of that growth is coming just from velocity increase.
Amazing. Do you feel like your consumer and customers are buying more than one SKU at once, or are they like just one's a hero brand for each region? Like, what do you see? I know it's like kind of asking like who's your favorite child, but do you see certain things in certain areas that are pulling more than the other?
So this is such a great question because um, it's a I think it's a very layered question, actually. So, different parts of the country sell more of different products.
Okay.
So, for instance, Pinot Grigio is just absolutely slaying it in California right now. It's growing like 115% year over year. It's nuts.
Amazing.
We can barely keep it on our distributors' floors. Um, Sauvignon Blanc is, crushing it in New York City.
Mm.
Our bubbly and bubbly rosés are killing it in the Southeast. So it is very like regional dependent. And what the interesting thing about this is that but even if you look across our business, like bubbly, which is our number one SKU, we have seven SKUs in our portfolio, is 22% of our sales.
Mm.
So it's not like there is one really obvious hero.
Right.
It really goes to show that among wine drinkers, if you are a Pinot Grigio drinker or a Pinot Noir drinker, like you're not going to substitute just because you like the packaging.
Mm.
You really are shopping varietally specific. And our insight was that one, uh, what you want to drink is going to evolve throughout the year, which we have absolutely seen to be true.
Mm.
And number two, that just because your taste buds might need more Sauvignon Blanc or Pinot Grigio doesn't mean that you also don't care about what you put in your body or share the same psychodemographic profile. It's just that you have, one flavor,
Right.
not to, and sorry, wine industry for using that word, but like one flavor profile
Right.
that jives more with that particular consumer.
Amazing. So I'm going to see you very soon at the
Very
Beverage
excited.
Forum in Manhattan Beach. And we were saying it's both of our first times going. So talk about that. I don't know. Have you been asked to speak on many panels or is this one of your first? What's the story here?
It's not my first panel, but this is a particularly exciting panel because, Elizabeth Banks and I are going to be on the panel together, and
Oh,
we're going to be
fun.
talking with one of our anchor retailers, which is Sprouts, about the programming that we've done together that we've really felt helped build the category.
Nice.
And I love panels where like we really get to talk to our partners about the value add that we bring to one another because I do think that often in the bev alc industry we kind of focus just on our particular tier when this industry works best when like all three tiers are working together in concert so that we
Mm.
can really give that end consumer what it is they're looking for. So I'm really excited, and it's always fun when Elizabeth joins us for things, and so it's really going to be a great discussion.
It's going to be so fun. Like I said, I'm going to see you there. I'm looking forward to it. I haven't been to Manhattan Beach ever, so it'll be a first time for me.
Oh, we'll definitely have to explore some of the really fun places to eat and drink in Manhattan Beach. It's great.
Absolutely. We're going to. And I am looking forward to seeing what's on the horizon with Archer Roose. Do you have anything that you want to share with me that's coming up in the pipeline?
Well, as I mentioned, we are launching a new SKU, which we're super excited about. It is a Chardonnay from Côte de Gascon,
Nice.
and it's not your grandmother's Chardonnay. It's not buttery and oaky. It's like really, it's like a Burgundian style, super easy to drink, very layered and lovely. And we are very excited also, since you are down in South Florida, we actually are going to be in the Tropicana Stadium this summer.
Wow, that's amazing. That's
Yeah,
exactly where you belong.
exactly, exactly.
I love
So
it.
we're really looking forward to just being part of people's experiences there.
So fun. So, how many markets are you in now, Marion?
We're actually in all 50 states.
Oh, amazing. I didn't
Yeah.
realize that. That's huge. I haven't had many guests on that'll have that answer. So you're one of the few. And like I said, you're my wine girl. This is my one and only wine episode for now at least.
So
And so I
so honored.
I am so happy that you were the person to do the job because I heard of Archer Roose from a previous guest last year. She had mentioned that you'd be a great guest. It was Rachel from Force Brands.
Oh yeah,
She
she's
loves your
fabulous.
product. And she was like,
Oh,
listen, Marion would be a great guest. So I'm so happy that you were able to join me on Sippin and Selling. I
I'm
appreciate it.
honored.
Yeah,
I'm
no, it was
honored. So
so
thank you
much
so much for
fun.
having me on.
You're very welcome. Was there anything that you feel like I left off that you want to share with the audience and the viewers?
No, only just that, I'm really excited to kind of continue to like introduce our product, our wines to consumers, and I hope that you give us a try.
Yeah. And where can they follow you on social media?
Absolutely. You can follow us at archerroosewines.com. I'm sorry,
Amazing.
oh
That's
my
your
God.
website.
No,
But yeah, at
at
Archer
Archer
Roose
Roose
Wines on Instagram.
Wines. Oh, good
So
Lord.
funny. That's okay. We like bloopers. I told you like cheese. It took me everything not to make a joke when you were like, there's layers. I was going to be like the cheese and the lasagna. Like I was
I
dying.
mean, I wish you had done that because if there's one thing that pairs great with wine, it's cheese.
That's right, girl. Let's go down that. What's your favorite cheese to pair with each varietal?
Oh my God, each varietal?
Yeah,
Okay.
or two, red and white. Pick a red and white.
Okay, well, I actually just did like a big cheese wine pairing, so
Oh,
let's have some fun with
nice.
this.
Okay.
So, okay, with the rosé, I
My fave.
really, yes, I really like a fresh goat cheese. Like,
Mm.
to me, it's just a fun kind of, summer, So it deserves something like very bright and fresh.
Yep.
Um, with our Pinot Noir, I actually love it's not from the same terroir, but
Okay.
it's something you can easily find at your Whole Foods, which is I'm a big fan of the cheese Midnight Moon. I could eat that,
Ooh.
I can eat that cheese all the time.
I've never tried
Um,
it. I'm gonna have to
oh my
try it.
gosh,
What's it like?
so good. It is it's got sort of a, nutty, taste to it. It is a hard cheese, made of sheep's milk, and it's really delicious, so
Mm.
delicious,
I'm
but
definitely
a
gonna
very
check
nutty
it out.
profile.
That's good. I like nutty
Um,
wines. Who doesn't?
yeah, yeah, exactly. I love, I love, like a fig jam and a brie with our Malbec.
Mm.
And with our Pinot Grigio, I feel like I've gotta say a Pecorino,
Yeah,
just because, like, those just go so perfectly together.
absolutely.
Um, and, our Sauvignon Blanc, it's actually, like it's got a lot of stone fruit in it, so, like, pear like, I would cut a piece of pear instead of a cracker and then put a little gorgonzola on it, and it'd be
Oh,
really
wow.
delicious.
You really know your cheese, girl.
Listen,
Cheese
I'm obsessed
connoisseur.
with cheese. I'm
So
obsessed
good.
with cheese.
I wanted to ask you about the JetBlue of it all because I've had
Please.
other guests that have had maybe like one varietal win, right? A spot on an airline. How many SKUs did you get? How did it work? And how does it work, right? Like at the time, I'm assuming you had all 50 seats, but if you didn't, please tell me. And how does it work, like with flying to certain places, like being able to
Yeah.
have your product there?
Well, um, so our story of JetBlue actually started back in 2019,
Okay.
where we convinced them to do a test. And I actually I won the test contract and then had
Nice.
to like build a whole new QA/QC process.
Okay.
And we launched January of 2020.
Wow. And then the
Yeah.
pandemic, shoot. Okay.
Yep.
So how did that work? Was it like you're on pause or you had to do it all over?
Well, yeah, no, we basically they were like, this contract is done. We're doing force majeure. And we sort of took the long view and we were like, okay, great. We're gonna figure this out. We'll find another channel to sell the wine in.
Hmm.
And let's just stay in contact. So I literally just kept updating them on our wins. And then in 2022, when they started serving wine on board, they started tapping us to help they had some supply chain challenges with other wines and I basically pitched them on being able to be a turnkey solution.
Nice.
And I was like, listen, we're gonna lower the gas that you need because we are less weight and so you'll require less fuel. I'm going to build a marketing campaign around this so you'll get publicity for the brand. And I'll make sure that you have no gaps. And they were like, all right, we'll give you a shot. So I actually won 4 SKUs on board
Wow. Major.
and it's major. And we love on JetBlue all the time because they are such important partners to us. And, yeah, we've been on board with them ever since. We didn't need 50 state distribution. Most airlines, um, they have particular catering states, and for each airline, it's different.
Okay.
But the biggest thing that I can say is, again, it comes back to everything else in selling, right? Like, what are the pain points that the operator in that channel that you're trying to get into are facing? And how can your product solve it? How can you be above and beyond partner? And that's really, I think, the basis of every great sales pitch. Um, you have to recognize that airlines are not going to be the most margin rich channel, but they are going to be a very powerful marketing engine. And we've been lucky in how generous our partners have been with us. And but and I would recommend it, for any entrepreneur out there who's thinking about partnering with them.
Yeah. And I'm sure that's how the cruise lines came and everything else is going to come and new, fans because they tried you on board. I mean, there's no advertisement like an airline. I mean, I talk about it all the time. I'm not the best flyer. So think of me when we're going to see each other in LA. I'm coming alone and I don't like to fly. So I try to set myself up for success. And I usually have to have like 2 glasses of Prosecco to kind of chill out. And it's so nice to hear that people can go on JetBlue and find Archer Roose on there because maybe they haven't heard of you guys yet. And now they're going to learn today. And where else?
And there's nothing I love better than seeing people tag us. Like, I
Yes.
still get such a thrill.
I love that. Yeah, for sure. Everybody who's listening and following now or not, now follow Archer Roose Wines on Instagram. And Marion was so thoughtful to share the website as well. And make sure you stay in touch with them because the Chardonnay is coming out. And Chardonnay isn't for your grandmas out there. You know, Chardonnay has its place and it is going to be a different type of flavor profile. So check that out. And be sure to stay in touch with the brand because they're doing amazing things. And my Floridians, check them out over here at the Tropicana Stadium. That's massive. Next is Hard Rock, baby.
Let's do it. Let's do
it. From my lips to who's the new manager over there's ears. Well, Marian, thank you so much for being on Sippin and Selling. I'm going to say your name one more time because I got it right. Marian Leitner-Waldman. I got it wrong.
No, listen, just remember, we talked about this. Just
I know, you're just like Marian the librarian. No, Marian like Madonna. That's the thing. Yeah. Marian like Madonna. That's so cute. Well, I'll see you in LA and we'll be sipping some Archer Roose together.
Fabulous. I can't wait to meet you in person. And thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Thank you for being here, Marian. Take care.
You too.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Sipping and Selling
with Joey Chanel.